Hi again. This time we're going to talk about research, but we're going to talk about the stuff that you need to do for the paper itself. And this time I'd like to show you how to do the research for this class, and then also to give you a sense of what humanities papers in general are expecting. So let's go to a little presentation, and then I'm going to take you on a tour of that libguide and show you how to use it. Okay, so here we go. So again, we're talking largely about research papers in the humanities and in the various languages. So obviously if you are doing an advanced class in, say, French or Russian or Mandarin, these techniques will also work in those contexts. They'll also work in philosophy or history or art history, and oftentimes also in the social sciences. This is a good way to start. Always you're going to start with the obvious things. So the first thing that I would do would be to go to Google. So here I go. I've just Googled the title of the poem itself. And what do I get? Well, first of all, I of course get the American Poetry Foundation hit. But then I see, From Bird and Bone, an analysis of Terence Hayes' American sonnet. And where is this? It's from, a paper site. Interesting. Yeah, not a quality site, not a site that we necessarily want you to be using. So let's go see what else there is here. We've got some readings of I Lock You in an American Sonnet. We've got an essay from cram.com, something that you can pay for. I think I can't use any of these for my paper, so let's keep going and see what else there is. Poetandpoetreview.org. It's a .org site, and it looks to me like it is the Portland Review, which is a poetry journal. That seems like a thing that might be a useful place to start. What else we got here? Well, I'm just digging around and seeing. There are the poems, and you'll see how many American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin are there. So in 2018, Terence Hayes wrote this sonnet series that has a whole bunch of quote-unquote American sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin, which means that you're going to have to make sure that you're researching the correct one. Now, another thing that I might want to do, rather than look for reviews online, here's one from the Sawney Review, which is also a reasonably good journal. It looks like this one is something that we also could use because it's an analysis of the poem itself, or one of them. So that's Google, right? I mean, that's the most obvious place to start. And with something like this is where students give up a lot of times. They say, well, I can't find what I'm looking for. You're not going to let me use the buy poetry sites, and these other analyses are really short, and you want a 15-page paper at the end of the semester. How am I supposed to do that? Okay, so let's try something else. Maybe if we Google Terence Hayes' name, we can get some other useful things. Here's his Poetry Foundation biography. That's a little bit of a start. He has his own website. That might be a useful site. Before we were looking at these secondary sources, but Terence talking about himself, well, that's a primary source. If you are going to look at something somebody else has written, that's a secondary source because it's writing about these poems. But if we Google Terence specifically and find out some stuff about him, here's his Wikipedia page, then that might count as primary source material. Let's see what we got here. Works, his life and education, the awards that he's won, and a bibliography. There are some more references that you can dig out of the Wikipedia page since you can't use Wikipedia. So you might want to, kind of fish around and see what you can find. And this will teach you some stuff about your topic, right? And in this case, it's going to teach you some stuff about the sonnet and its author. Those are the most obvious places to start. Okay? But sometimes Google's just not enough. Google does not aggregate all of the scholarly sources that we have access to at a university. So after we try Google and we dig through the most obvious sources on the internet, we have to go to the next step. And the reason that Google is not enough, and the reason that the internet is not enough, is that it's going to aggregate things that are free and most interesting to the public. Now, a lot of the things that you can get from the library are behind a paywall, and that paywall is part of what your tuition pays for. We have subscriptions to access research that regular people who are not university students or university affiliated cannot access. I have go in quotes here because of the fact that obviously these days we're not doing very much actual going to the physical library to get books out. I'm aware of the fact that students don't generally use real live physical books, which saddens me because there's a lot of stuff in there that is very useful to you if you actually want to go to the shelves. So I think I told you last week that I didn't want to hear there's no research about this, right? And so one of the things I really want to help you to do is to figure out what to do when you have a topic, but there's not much in the library that's about the specific topic that you're assigned. After you have gone to the library website, now it's time to take those search terms looked at in Google and move them into the same kind of very basic search at the library. So I've gone straight to Chinook, which is the library catalog, and I see here that this is the old interface, but this is still my one search interface. And this is a chance for you to self-righteously say, this is only on Wikipedia and in some blog sites, and I would have, if this were a topic that people cared about, I would actually have used good library sources, but there are no library sources, right? And we instructors love that sort of thing because what you're doing really is using primary source material to make your argument. And so that's the way to frame something that you can't find research in the library about but still want to write about. And that happens most often with social science topics or topics that are so recent or such popular culture topics that nobody has written scholarly or academic work about it. And so in your paper you get to say, hey, I'm doing this thing, I'm doing it first, and I'm doing it in a way that I hope other people will take up. So again, we love that sort of thing. Okay. Well, why don't I say Hayes, Terrence, and see what we get. And the first hit is American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin from 2018. The second hit is another book of Terrence's poetry, and on and on and on. And we'll see that actually he's quite prolific and there's quite a lot of books by him. I've done a keyword search. Maybe I don't want a keyword search. I want a title search. Maybe somebody's written a book about him. Nope. Your entry would be here. Nobody's written a book about Terrence Hayes. Okay, so good to know. Maybe I don't want to use just the Chinook search. And so this is where I suggest you go off script and use my libguide that I had the library build for me for this course. Part of the reason I assigned the Terrence Hayes poem to begin with, which is a relatively new poem, is that you're not going to find very much about it. But one thing that I did do for you is to ask the library to build what's called a libguide that will help us through the appropriate sources for a paper like this. The easiest way to do that is to just Google my last name, which is Brylo, and libguide, and it will take you straight to the libguide that was made for my class. It was made by Amanda Koob, who is the librarian that is specific to my subject area. So if you ever have questions, one of the nice things about this LibGuide is that she does know these assignments. I've talked to her extensively about this course, and you can speak to a librarian who will help you do research on this project specifically. Okay, that's her job, is among all the other things that she does. She's a professor, and her job is to help students to do research, to help faculty do advanced research, and then also to help us order more books and ensure that the knowledge that we specifically need as researchers is available to the scholarly community that uses the CU library. If any of you came from a different university, you'll notice that of the Colorado libraries, this is the most extensive and the largest. That's one of the nice things about being at the flagship university, is that your access to research is better than any other library in the state. Okay, she's put some things together here, including the MLA International Bibliography, and that's an aggregated source of things that are about modern languages. Again, remember from last week that MLA stands for the Modern Language Association. Literature online. Gale Literature is another source of site for primary source, whereas MLA and Lion are usually limited to secondary sources. JSTOR also secondary sources. And then WorldCat, which is a book search. So this gives me a few different ways to do the search. It also has this one search for ebooks, right? Because we're dealing with an online world. And again, you can use this. This is built for this class, but it's something that you can use for other classes as well. So you can just Google Syntax Citation Analysis LibGuide and use these resources, and you know that these are resources that the library has, but you don't have to go through the rigmarole of actually using the library site. She also has built this tab that says Resources for Literary Analysis. Here's a sort of ebook that's about forms of poetry, as well as an ebook that's about syntax that might be useful to you. And then she also has links to all kinds of different sources, including, by the way, the OED. We have quite a few OED dictionary definitions, which the class has already generously produced for one another. Here are a bunch of poetry primary sources which may or may not be useful to you, given the fact that you have the poem already. It depends on how you decide to proceed with the conversation that you're joining. And then finally, we have this resources for how to build an annotated bibliography. And here are some databases that you can use to dig up stuff depending on the conversation that you want. Now notice a lot of those things are also on the home page. She's offered us some citational software, Zotero, which people use to build their bibliographies sometimes. There's all of these video tutorials for how to use it. It is a little bit beyond the scope of my class to teach you how to use Zotero, but I really recommend using a software like this. And you'll notice the way MLA is set up, it's really inviting with its idea of containers, a kind of database model for how to think about MLA Works Cited page. Okay, now you've got the LibGuide under your belt. Let's go back to the presentation and think about what's next. Now it's time to join a conversation. So now, what kind of conversations does this sonnet invite? Well, many of you have already either emailed me or mentioned things in your paper that imply a conversation that you're interested in or excited about. Some of those conversations are about how sonnets work, right? I've had a couple of emails saying, hey, this sonnet doesn't seem to work like a regular sonnet. Some of you have had classes about African American authors in English where you've noticed that there are some connections between this sonnet and another one. That's certainly a possibility. Maybe you want to do a paper about how this particular sonnet speaks to the concerns of Terence Hayes as an author and how we can read his biography into details in the sonnet. That's a literary form, but also a space. And there's like 100 million other conversations that you can join. What I want you to do is to think about that conversation, and then from there, go to the LibGuide and say, all right, so I want to talk about maybe Black poetry. Here's a bunch of possibilities, things that you might want to consider. You have already done 5 to 8 pages of analysis. That analytical work is yours. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It's your words and it's your ideas. And therefore, what you are going to do is bring your idea to this conversation. And that's why I'm suggesting that you use the libguide as a way to, after you've identified your conversation, as a way to start to do the research process. It's been a long day. I'm home now. That's my dog, my Doge in the background. And I want to just say goodbye, but also to tell you that the conversation joining that we're talking about is something that's incredibly well modeled in the essay about Ozymandias that I've assigned. And I hope that this video was useful to you. Thanks a lot. Take care. Have a good week. And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.